it's my great pleasure to introduce Mr. Abdul Kamdar, who is the Chief Innovation Officer at KDG Logistics. So AK has been leading the way in introducing cutting-edge technologies to the logistics industry in South Africa. So in addition to these things, AK has developed a strong network of international collaborators and has also received significant technology innovation agency funding to further the program for developing these innovations. So I'm mentioning this, AK, because many of the people here, well, in fact, everyone here is applying for TR funding as well.
Okay.
And so, this group is largely to talk around innovation and entrepreneurship and those things. So it's basically take it away, AK.
Okay, thank you so much for that. And in light of that, so the fact that data is sort of what brought us here, but entrepreneurship and also getting funding is sort of some of your challenges going forward. I've taken the liberty of preparing a short presentation that is not focused entirely just on data and data sculpting, but on looking at a few things with your permission, and some of the things that I would have liked someone to have told me when I was at this point in my life. So, hindsight is absolutely brilliant at showing you how stupid you were, or how young and naive you were at some point. So I was young at some point. You may not say that from how I appear right now, but so along the way, pearls of wisdom have dropped on me like a ton of bricks sometimes. And you see where you went wrong, and sometimes you arrive at a point where wisdom comes in strange ways. So I'd like to share some of that with you. And the fact that I'm not hugely intelligent myself, still being a student, I'm currently registered at a university, strangely enough for this age. But there's some things that I've picked up in books that I've read that I will share with you along the way in my slides. So you might find a number of quotations there, but some of it may have resonance, and some of it is actually to add a bit of wisdom to what I'm providing. So let me open sharing. So I need to figure out how this works. Let's see if I can get it right first time. So you should be able to, in a second, see my slide.
Yep.
Is it visible yet?
We can see it.
Excellent. So we set out to talk about data as a creator of value, and sort of the underlying subtopic is looking at opportunities for entrepreneurship in the data. And I thought I'd use case studies in road transport to sort of be the carrier of the ideas. The intention was to look at two case studies, but just very briefly, just to give you an idea of sort of how to monetize data or convert it into useful function. Because some of my background is in industrial engineering, and in industrial engineering, we look at ways to create value or to flow value. And data can be a strong conduit for that. But the case studies will be based briefly on KDG Logistics, the company I work at, as well as, by way of example, another company in Sweden, in a small town called Malmö, beautiful town actually. So one of the mistakes that I made was in outlining the topic, data as a creator of value. I don't think that's entirely true. You are the creator of the value as a data sculptor. Data is a source of value. So my first correction to my slides. So we'll talk about data as a source of value. And I think it's important to make that distinction because you need to recognize where you fit into that space. So next slide. No matter what he does, every person on earth plays a central role in the history of the world. And normally she or he does not know it. That's a quote from The Alchemist. It's a lovely book. It's an easy read. And I think it's important to understand that as a scientist, as an entrepreneur, as an academic, there is an opportunity to change something. And in that something, you create a ripple that someone else changes into something else. and you part of that tide, you part of the current that actually creates a waves of change on Earth. So it's actually quite a pivotal role that we play. Sometimes we find ourselves as insignificant droplets in that river, but it's every single droplet that makes up that river. So bear with me with some of the philosophy that comes through with the slides. As an engineer, I should really be steering away from philosophy, but we all have our issues. So innovation and entrepreneurship. So I think it's important to sit back sometimes and take a view on why do we do what we do? What is the objective? Who are the stakeholders and what are the expectations? Sometimes we get so passionately absorbed into the idea itself that we actually lose sight of these things. And when talking about the expectations, society has this thing about entrepreneurs that we should be survivalists. We should be able to, deal with failure. And some say, you've got to fail fast. And there's a whole lot of issues on a whole lot of things around. We got to fail, we got to fail, we got to keep trying. But it's damn hard sometimes. But the secret is always to remember that you've got to actually get up and get going again. No matter how many times you fail, it may be 10, 20, it may be any number of times. But the trick is to actually learn from it, but you actually have to physically get up, remotivate, and inspire yourself in some way to make the next step. And that next step is to get back at it and get going again. So this to me is possibly the slide that I really would have wanted to have in front of me when I was in my 20s. It's a Japanese concept called Ikigai, which in Japanese, a literal translation is a reason for being. And what it does is it takes what you're pursuing in your life, whether it is a career path or a passion area, but if you look at it from a career perspective, and if you're choosing a direction, so in setting up a business or even choosing a degree to pursue or a postgrad, and I think it's pivotal actually at postgrad level for you to consider what you are doing in terms of 4 quadrants. And it's a useful frame of analysis because it allows you to consider what you're doing in terms of, is it what you love? Is it what the world needs? Is it what you can get paid for, or is it what you're good at? And the nice thing is it's resolved it very, very nicely into some very simple concepts. So if it is something that you love, as well as something that the world needs, that's actually a mission. It's a calling. If it's what the world needs and something you can get paid for, it's simply a vocation. If it's something you're good at and you can get paid for it, that's a profession. If it's what you're good at and what you love, that's your passion. Now, your passion, so each one of them actually pulls you in a certain direction. But if you can find a balance between these 4 quadrants, that's that middle ground here where you're satisfying simultaneously what you love with what you can get paid for, and it's what you're good at and it's what the world needs. And in the central space, you actually find that unique balance between doing what you're passionate at and what really drives you, and balancing it off with something that is sort of a mission in some ways, but it's in a sense a profession and a vocation as well because you're getting paid for it. So when you're facing crossroads or if you're looking for direction, I think this is really a very, very important thing to understand, that there's this middle ground that you can aim for. Because very often, I know with me personally, I've always gravitated towards this section here. Moving on, let's see. It's important to understand that wherever your heart is, there you will find your treasure. And that's also from The Alchemist. It's a lovely little book. It's a very easy read, and it's full with gems. So let's talk about briefly what is an entrepreneur. George Bernard Shaw, one of the best writers and philosophers that ever lived. He said, "The reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man persists in trying to adapt the world to himself. All progress, therefore, depends upon the unreasonable man. It's very important to understand this because very often, as an entrepreneur, you are seen as being the weirdo, the crazy one. I mean, where do you get that idea from? Why would it even work? But the reality is, if we accept the status quo as it is, progress stops. If we simply say it's nice just the way it is, that's it, it's game over. So we have to persist in being unreasonable. We have to persist in wanting more, wanting faster, wanting better. And that is the essence of what we do. That's what drives, I believe, innovation. So where are we in the technology timeline? I think it's very, very important to understand in the history and evolution of industry and technology, where are we right now, and whatever we're trying to develop, where does it fit into the landscape? So we are at a really unique point in human evolution, and possibly in, I think, maybe in terms of where the planet is. So if you look at the early technologies, the invention of the wheel, the control of fire, I mean, those took thousands of years to achieve. But if you look at the last 200 years, from the 1700s, the water power mechanization, and then subsequently steam power, then electricity, then petrochemicals, these waves have become more and more intense in terms of the power to change things, the influence on human behavior on the planet. And these waves are shorter in duration, so the timeline becomes condensed, but the impact becomes greater. So the power is significant. And we're at a point now where in a very short space of time, you can change the course of mankind. So a simple thing like an app on a phone can suddenly generate new connectivity between people, new functionality, and a whole new way of living. In a sense, some of these applications even challenge what it means to be human. And so this is the unique position where you are positioned now in human evolution and technology evolution. So I think it's important to understand that, but I think it's also important to understand how your customer or how your innovation partner or market has evolved. So if you look at the generation of human beings, and for me, it was fascinating to see. This is research done by McCrindle. I think he's an Australian guy, and some of his work has been challenged in the sense that he defines generations according to from a certain year to certain year, and it's roughly about 15 years apart. So I believe there's a bit of gray area around the chronology, so the exact years and that sort of thing. But I think it's very important to understand that the differences do exist. So if you look at the builders, baby boomers, generation X, Y, Z, now you're looking at alpha. The iconic technology of that era is something that sometimes, it's quite interesting to look back and see, the audio cassette, the television, VCR, Walkman, the IBM PC. This is quite recent past in terms of human history. The internet, the MacBook, the iPad, Google, Facebook, Twitter. So all of what we take for granted now as defining how we work with each other and across the planet is all fairly recent. This is post 1995 stuff mostly. So if you look at that, if you look at the social markers, the pivotal events that have happened in those periods, that's also quite defining. I think in terms of what you are doing, looking at what influences these generations is also very important. So for example, the Gen Z is the first generation that is largely influenced by social media, chatbots, digital beings almost. So it's important to understand this landscape of society, to understand where your innovation fits in, who's the market, where are the friction areas in its implementation. And Gen Z itself, the post-1995 generation, provides a unique digital engagement because If you look at the digital integration side, there's strong evidence that there's more than 10 hours tech use per person, 5 billion searches per day. It's a huge population, 2 billion people. So this generational analysis, I think, is pivotal in understanding where your technology fits in, where your innovation fits in, where you're going to build on your entrepreneurship. This is a very highly connected generation, that is Gen Z, and sometimes I think we stuck into understanding or knowledge of what our generation is and does, and we lose sight of a broader landscape. So I think it's important to understand that when we're developing entrepreneurship ideas, and sometimes you can take that entire landscape and divide it into two groups: digital immigrants, so that's me and other gray-haired people who to whom digital technologies has been something that arrived during our lifetimes. And then you have the next generation who are digital natives who cannot imagine a world without a smartphone, who cannot imagine a world where you had to post a letter and someone had to physically carry the paper across the planet and deliver it on the other side. So if you look back even 50 years in terms of how society functioned, it's night and day. And the reason I give this example is because the digital world is at its absolute infancy, although it seems quite mature and evolved right now, but it really is quite at its infancy. And a lot of the digital tools that will exist 10 years from now have not even been conceived yet. So that landscape is actually a blank canvas and ready to be explored and exploited. Coming to the topic, data. The simple things are also the most extraordinary things, and only the wise can see them. And I think that's very powerful, because data is the building blocks of what we do. It's what we transact. But you can take that building block and you can do just about anything with it. And that's where the real value comes in. That's where you apply your mind and you create something out of a seeming sea of insignificant data. So the first step in what we do, the first or the primary lever of adding value is making sense out of the chaos. So data can be daunting to the uninitiated, but if you have a few tools, you can start seeing the patterns in the data, and the data starts speaking a story. And in that story, you actually write the narrative that you see coming out of that data story, and you actually sell that narrative. Because there are people out there who are bewildered by data or don't even see it sometimes. But that's where the value creation comes from. It's making the sense out of it. You take that and you can develop new solutions, or sometimes you can even remove friction in a current solution. And just by removing that friction, you create value. Sometimes you could take that data and use it to eliminate process steps, and you automate some part of a process, and in that you can create significant value. And sometimes you just take that data and develop a whole new product out of it. But ultimately, what you need to do in order to create, successful entrepreneurship is you need to flow value. There needs to be someone who needs to use something that you create. And it has to have a unique value proposition, some form of differentiation that makes it scalable, because having a great idea is one thing, but it actually has to be uniquely valuable to society. So let's talk about specific cases. For my sins, I've been employed in a road transport company since about 2013, and we are a car carrier company. It's KDG Logistics. We deliver new cars for Toyota, Nissan, and Ford. Now, one of the significant steps forward that we took in 2013 was to fit telematics, vehicle tracking system, onto every vehicle. And what we did back then, it was quite avant-garde in its time. We integrated the fleet telematics with the vehicle CAN bus system, so we could extract data from the CAN bus. So we had vehicle level data that we were pulling through the telematic system and accessing that to understand what the vehicle was doing on the road in terms of fuel consumption and that kind of thing. So it was quite rudimentary back then, but over time, we got to develop strong data sets out of that, and that became the basis on which we developed innovation within the business, and through that we managed to drive our costs down significantly and improve our customer interfaces. The way the customers perceived us, because our level of professionalism was guided by strong data now. And whilst in 2013 that was quite avant-garde, a lot of what we did back then as innovation is now readily available as off-the-shelf solutions. But the telematics gives you a basis on which to work, and it's what you do with that matters. So the WebFleet telematics system offers you a lens into your business where you can know what your vehicles are doing 24/7. You can actively manage fuel consumption and maintenance. It has some external plugins that you can develop, so it can interact with other parts of your application in how you manage your business. It can do real-time routing, and it can improve service levels. So this is what they sell you as off the shelf. So largely we use it for in the company for operations planning, pickup and delivery information, fuel consumption monitoring, the risk management. We develop some HR functions from it. But if you look at the value that it offers you in its standard form, it reduces pickup lead times, pre-delivery notification for clients, some cost reduction, simplifying of administration. And you got to step back and say, so where is the value? How much of value does it really add? So it reduces the lead time by about an hour per trip. The notifications are nice. The fuel consumption monitoring is about 20% of our fuel bill, which is quite a huge impact. And that's what they sell them on, these systems, is on basic functionality. But I looked for how can we use that differently? How can we significantly extract value from that same data set? And what we have developed is a model for dynamic predictive costing. So now all of a sudden you could track which vehicle's fuel consumption, so vehicle driver combination has specific fuel consumptions, and you could look at in real time how many driving hours has the driver accumulated for that month, and you can actually predict what the cost of the next trip is going to be based on, is it normal time, is it overtime, what is his fuel consumption? And you could develop a dynamic we have developed dynamic dashboards where you can rank the drivers and the differences in real time in what that combination of truck driver and truck contribute to the actual cost of the trip. And the variation that you develop in this can be as much as 30%, 35%. So in a business where your net profit is under 5%, to be able to have a value lever of around 35% is huge. So dynamic predictive costing in real time is a game changer. Talking about game changers, the project that Prof. Rawat and I have been working on is gamification for fuel management and safety. And that has a potential of having a great societal impact in the safety reduction, safety improvement, accident reduction, but also in reducing fuel consumption. There's a linear correlation between fuel consumed and tailpipe emissions. So at the same time, you reduce CO2 in the atmosphere. And interestingly enough, a lot of people don't realize that annually there's about 1.25 million deaths from road accidents and over 7 million deaths from air pollution related illnesses. So CO2 emissions is a necessary part of what we need to control. We can get from the telematics some baselines of the business, and we can do some performance engineering. We also develop good CO2 emissions reporting. We can compare trips, develop new insights. So we take that data as the building blocks and we innovate in terms of what functionality we develop from it. So let's now look at another company overseas. So this is Malmö Lastbil Central. It's a company, Anders Jonsson is the CEO of the company, brilliant young man. Um, and the company is it's quite innovative because they do not own any of the trucks. So it's a cooperative of 107 trucks owned by various people. Most of them are owner drivers. And so he put together a software platform, and the vehicle telematics is a vital part of what they do. So his differentiator was taking the data set from telematics and developing something quite unique. So his value proposition was to take the delivery day of the entire fleet and break it up into two value propositions. So they focused on regional distribution and delivery, and during the day they deliver normal commercial deliveries. So whether it's supermarkets or offices or general courier services, that's what they focus on in the morning. And when he tendered for that business, so a lot of it is large corporate contracts. When he tendered for that business, he offered to the customer an app on their phone where the owner of the cargo could see in real time that all deliveries would be completed by midday. So he gave a guarantee that every item will be delivered before 12. And what he provides is real-time tracking on your phone as a customer as to what percentage has been delivered at a certain point in time. Um, which was actually very interesting, because the customer was more used to saying, waiting for the exception and saying, listen, I have this customer who's not happy, their parcel hasn't been delivered. So he turned it around, and he made it a push notification to them to show completion of daily activity. So that mindset shift offered the customer huge confidence in transacting with him. So despite not owning a single truck, he used the software to develop a layer of functionality that allowed him to sell something. And what he sold was confidence in the delivery level. And then he used telematics to make sure that the service providers within the cooperative scheme actually deliver on time. So his business takes a small percentage as a management fee. It's almost like an Uber for freight. So, and the amazing thing is he doesn't have to own any of the trucks or operate them, but yet he offers best-in-class service delivery. There is no company in Sweden that can do what he does. And this is based on simply applying intelligence to the data set. So what he did was also quite interesting. He developed a two-tier business. So he made sure that he could deliver everything by 12, and that satisfied the commercial customers. But he left the entire fleet free to do something else in the afternoon. So he went in and he sourced business in delivering to homes, pet food, and wine. And in that, he developed an app-based product that allowed the customer, who the person who ordered the so two customers. So the one is the business that has the pet food service, and the other is the actual customer who's receiving the pet food. So the retail client, for example, will get a notification that so and so pet food company thanks you for your order. We are providing the fulfillment service. There is a vehicle scheduled to be in your area this evening. What time slot would suit you best? Do you have any special instructions for the driver? This is a picture of the driver. This is a registration number of the vehicle. And you can offer instructions to that driver. For example, do not ring the doorbell. My kids are asleep. Or leave the items in the locker on the ground floor. Or whatever unique delivery instruction that you had, you could offer that to the driver at that point of engagement. So it's not just, you have a parcel, it will be delivered on that day. So he developed a customer centricity that allowed the customer to feel that this delivery was personalized to him. And this created a value proposition that offered value to the owner of the cargo. So the pet food company no longer just had a fulfillment operation, no longer had a warehouse that simply did deliveries, but it had something that defined a unique sense of value to how the delivery was transacted, and it built onto their brand. It provided something that unique in as a delivery proposition to the customer. So it turns the retail customer actually into brand ambassadors for the cargo owners. And the reason I use these two examples, KDG Logistics and Malmö Lastbil Central, is that We both use the same telematics. We both use that same underlying data set, but we use it in completely different ways. So in a business where movement of cars is commoditized, I use it to generate value within the company in reducing the cost to operate, and also to develop customer interfaces that gives them some confidence in where the vehicles are. But Anders, on the other hand, uses it to develop a completely different business value proposition for retail customers. So I think it's important to know that how you interpret the story that the data is telling, and what story you're selling, that comes from you. And that's what you bring to the table. It's the possibility of having a dream come true that makes life interesting, again, from The Alchemist. So I think when we consider what you're looking to bring to market, the idea, the concept, the project, the product, is it unique? Is it innovative? Is it novel? It doesn't have to be. If it is, it's nice, because very often you get traction from that. But it may be an existing idea, something that already exists, but you just put a different spin on it, and you bring a new, maybe a frictionless way of transacting it, or in some way you make it different. If you believe it's unique or novel or individual or new, how do you know this? What have you done to test this? Because sometimes you put a pitch deck together and you present it to Tia, and you say, I've developed the world's first self-driving lawnmower. And it may not be so. So when you present something, it's very important to test what you're going to promise, or what you're going to predict, or what you're proposing, and to be quite certain about your value proposition. When you present an idea, you need to know what is unique about it. What is the one thing, or what are the few things that make it fundamentally different and attractive, both to the market as well as to an investor? And this is pivotal. Do you have access to all the skills and resources to execute it? So the skills may not necessarily be within yourself or within your team, but if it's outside, do you have access to it? And it's unhindered access. So that's critical, because if you're trying to develop a widget and there are 3 technology layers that you need to develop in getting the widget ready for market, do you have all the resources convincingly? Can you convince an investor from the outside that you have all those resources lined up? And the key is, who would fund it? So you need to know what is your actual ask. What do you need to get this idea to market? And this is pivotal. So how many obstacles are there to scaling this? So if you're looking to bring a widget to market, and no one sold a widget like this ever before, in fact, no one's seen a widget like this before. So there may be a hardware layer that does not exist yet, or an interconnectivity that does not exist yet to other prior generation widgets, or there may be a software interface that doesn't exist, and you may know how to create that software interface, but that hardware that doesn't exist yet. So if you've got multiple obstacles to scale to bring widgets to market, each obstacle, you may do great at flicking the one away, but the other one may just kill you. So you need to understand how many obstacles you have to scale, and what is your probability of actually scaling that. So you may have huge confidence around your software abilities in that widget, but if the hardware platform doesn't exist yet, and if you do not have a convincing argument as to who is going to generate that and how, or who's going to provide that, the investor needs to see some security in how this product finally gets realized. And for each obstacle, you need to have contingencies around the what ifs. So if the hardware is not available from Samsung, Sony has something in development, or NVIDIA has something in development. So you need to know the landscape around each of the obstacles, and how you are going to scale it. Or if you're relying on third parties, what are the contingencies to make sure that they are overcome. And then, in the event that widget materializes on time, and you've got it going, and you've got your first prototypes ready, and you've tested it, and everything's looking hunky-dory, what is your route to market? You may have the best widget ever. I mean, it could be a widget on steroids. But if you don't know your route to market, if you can't access the market, then it's of no use. You also need to understand what is your market size. So, you need to look at the relevance of your product to market. Where does it fit in? What is the size of the market, to understand, based on your cost to produce the widgets and what you're going to sell it at. You need to be able to figure out how you're going to monetize it. Where's the lever you're going to pull to bring money in? Because what the investor really looks for, it comes down to two things. Where's my risk? Where's the value? It's just those two things. I need to reduce risk, maximize value. I need to part with as little money as possible and maximize how much money I'm going to get in soonest. What is vital also is to look at the product expected life cycle. If you don't know this, you don't know how much of longevity you have in the widget product. And sometimes, you may predict that this widget is going to change the world for forever, and then widget Power Plus arrives on the market 2 years later and you haven't recovered your investment yet. So you need to know, is there a potential threat or disruptor to that space? What are the left field widget 2, widget 3, or widget 2.0? And can you pivot what you're doing in the event that a disruptor comes along? I think these are important considerations that we need to consider in all new ventures. And I think even when you're pitching to the likes of TIA, no matter how good your idea is, at the back of their mind, these are the things that they are looking at. And then finally, what is your exit strategy? So when you grow widgets to the point where you're selling a gazillion a day, and you've monetized it and it's making great money, what is your exit strategy? Because you need to surf this thing till it gets to its peak, and you need to exit when it's right at its peak and maximize what you get out of it. So you can take your gazillion dollars and invest it into the venture capital fund that will produce the next 10 new best things. So investors are also looking for that. Where can they cash out and how much will they get? And once you've got all that wrapped up, I think you need to then look back at, so who does it serve? Who does this project, who does this product, who does the widget actually serve? And where does this whole thing fit in your Ikigai? Does it bring meaning to your life? Does it add value to society? Because ultimately, you are here to enable the divine purpose of the universe to unfold. And that is how important you are. Okay, my last quote. There is only one thing that makes a dream impossible to achieve, and that's the fear of failure. So it wasn't the last quote. And when you want something, all the universe conspires in helping you to achieve it. Thank you. That's it.
Great. Thank you so much, AK. So thank you. That was really an excellent presentation. I found it both inspiring and also extremely relevant in terms of where these young entrepreneurs are right now. So with that, I'd like to open the paper to questions. And please use the reactions to raise your hand. And then before your question, please introduce yourself and maybe just briefly mention what project you're working on. So while we're waiting for that, maybe AK, I could just ask, you mentioned about the exit strategy and unpacking, about an exit strategy. And sometimes, when we are first developing the concept, we are just thinking about, that we'll get this company up and running, and we imagine ourselves just sort of growing old into that company and so on. So maybe you could unpack a bit about the importance of actually exiting from the work and what the thinking is around that.
Okay, so I think when you look at an exit strategy, you need to look at it in two ways, right? So sometimes you actually want to build a product that you can forever benefit from, or drive, or develop, or redevelop. Like, for example, the Tesla. So Elon Musk didn't develop, the first electric car. He actually jumped into a project that was already reasonably successful in what it did, and reasonably differentiated as an electric vehicle. But where he is in that technology space, he could be producing electric cars for the rest of his life, So for him, in that sense, it could be a lifetime product. And but still, even if you look at that vehicle, the early investors may have wanted to know where can they get off the bus. So is it possible for them to fund an early round of investment and then cash out their investment in a certain timeline? So when you're pitching to TIA or any other funder or even a venture capital company as an investor, if you're asking them for 10 million rand, for example, to develop the widget, you may not want to exit this project ever, but you need to offer them that if they want to exit at year 2, 3, 4, 5, you need to be able to show them the curve of scaling into the market, this curve of monetizing, and at a price earnings ratio, this is what they can get for their 10 million rand investment in year 5, as an example. So you may not want to exit, or you may want to exit, but for the investor, it's very important to be able to see what's the capital growth in that period. Because venture capitalists, they look for multipliers. They don't look for a percentage return. They look for a multiple return. So if they invest 10 million, they want 100 million for it or 50 million for it. And they want to know when that's going to happen. They may stay for the ride forever if they see the growth is continuous. But it's very important upfront when you're pitching to be able to show at what point they could exit and how. So who would buy them out? Who would pay for that share? So an exit strategy could be an exit for you or for the investor.
So maybe it has to do with those 4 overlapping circles. So if it's your passion project, you won't want to exit. But if it's your where you make your money and other things like that, then it's easier. Okay, Zamishka, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Zamishka. I'm working with Prof on the Industrial Symbiosis project, the Chemicals Without Borders topic, and I'm working on the clustering aspect of that project. And what my question was, is like Prof just mentioned now, when it's your passion project, when it's something that you've sort of come up with yourself and you've developed it over time, how do you sort of plan that life cycle? Because I know you mentioned it, I think 2 or 3 slides ago, where you have to plan out your cycle from the beginning until the end, and then you decide, okay, it's at its peak now I need to get rid of it. But it's easy to say that when you're at the end of your project and you can see, okay, this is how I should have done things. But when you're there at the beginning, how do you map it out from the start and decide when, okay, this is now the peak, and set it at that point?
Great question. Thank you for that. And I think, that's one of the challenges you face. And the fact that you consider that your idea could have a life cycle, I think that is also, at the very least, that in itself is comforting to the investor, that that your idea may not be there forever. But I think also as an entrepreneur, it's very important for you to understand that, as a fundamental. So we get caught up in the passion of creation and the quality of the idea. And in that passion, we lose sight of the fact that there may be someone equally passionate about widget 2.0. And you don't want to be blindsided by widget 2.0. Just the fact that you keep your eye open and you have your radar on, looking out for that, because the landscape is dynamic, and the parts of there's what is within your locus of control and what is outside of your locus of control. So what is within your locus of control of that life cycle of the product is the gestation of it, getting it ready for market, the monetizing of it, the scaling of it into market. So those 3 aspects builds your growth curve. It grows your income curve, and it grows the value curve for your investor, and that's critical. But if you go back to that slide where I was talking about the technology waves, so what's interesting, those are what they call Schumpeter waves. Joseph Schumpeter was an economist from Europe about 50, 60 years ago, and they're called waves of creative destruction, because what they do is, while they innovate new ideas, it essentially kills the previous thing. So electricity kills steam power, petrochemicals killed electrification in certain industries. Digital kills analog. The Walkman or the iPod killed the Walkman. All of these things. So your investor needs to know that you understand how to grow your income and how to scale your business. That you have a growth strategy. But the investor also needs the confidence in you that that there could be someone else out there or some idea out there that could challenge yours in the market. And in looking at that, you need to know what is your strategy around that. So whilst you will commit to the project, you will also not be blindsided by something that's outside of what you are doing. So it's not an easy thing. What you're saying is exactly true. It's easier to see it after it happened. But if you can spend some of your time and apply your mind in some way to looking at what could the competitors be, where would they arrive at, you can actually generate those pivots yourself, so that you yourself, in your enthusiasm, you don't lose sight of the fact that you can reinvent your product as it starts generating a huge peak. You can reinvent that product to be widget 2.0 and to be widget 3.0, so that you stay ahead of the curve, and extend your product cycle. Hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Great, thanks. Sudain?
Thank you, Prof. Hi, Mr. Kamdar. I'm Sudain. First, let me say on behalf of the group, we're very thankful that you took time out of your schedule to help us a bit along on our development process. So I do a bit of work with Prof as well on the same Chemicals Without Borders project, but I'm more on the knowledge representation aspect of doing things. So my question would be, like the situation that we face as a whole with COVID, it's terrible objectively, but looking at it, it presents a lot of opportunity. So one of the opportunities, for example, is, you're speaking about getting pet food delivered. So in Joburg, for example, as we know, that's been one of the worst hit places with COVID in South Africa. And recently there's been a development of an application, I believe it's called One Cart. And I heard about this from some of my friends that they're living there. Theoretically, it's quite good, because apparently what it claims to do is you can purchase any number of items from any of these stores, Pick and Pay, Checkers, etc., so on and so forth. And a driver would essentially deliver this, whatever it is you've purchased, to you. The problem with it is, while it sounds theoretically good, it's quite pricey. So apparently there's a certain percentage of what you've ordered which goes to get paid towards the driver and the whole application as a whole. So my question would be, even coming up with something new and innovative like this, which theoretically should be something which there's a demand for, nobody wants to go out during COVID and buy things or do shopping or whatever. So this is a brilliant thing, but how do you kind of hit that sweet spot where it's you're meeting the demand, so you bang in the center of that centroid of demand, yet you're still not making it click in a certain way where you're getting the users to use it, or you're getting people to jump on board. In the case of One Cart, it was cost, but how do we keep our eyes open to not preventing our own success for projects in future?
Okay, great question. And I think what you need to be aware of is that we should never fixate on price, never fixate on the cost of the service, fixate on the value it provides. So value is function divided by cost. So if you provide a certain functionality or feature like the automated delivery of groceries, so you have effectively you have a digital personal shopper. So you go online, you choose what you want, and it places the orders. And incidentally, there's an idea around that I think is missed at the moment, and that is predictive shopping. Because if you place orders for X, Y, and Z products this month, chances are you may be ordering very similar to that basket next month. I haven't seen yet any shopping program that says, AK, would you like your toiletries the same as last month? This was your order last month. Can we auto execute that for you? I think that'd be great functionality, but that's a separate matter. So in this application that you spoke of now, what they're actually selling is your time. Yes, COVID is a great opportunity in which to market the safety of you not having to interact with people and not going to stores. But what they're actually giving you back is, so it's the risk of COVID that may be the primary sales argument. But in Johannesburg, for you to typically get into a shop and get out again, you've got to navigate at least half an hour of traffic each way. And so you give up maybe an hour or 2 hours of your life in getting your shopping done. And if you attach value to that, the program you're talking of may have a 100 Rand delivery fee and maybe 10% of the value of your basket transaction fee. So if you look at that, it may be a total of 300 Rand. But if you are working in data science in Rosebank, you may be earning 1,000 Rand an hour, 500 Rand an hour, whatever that number is. So or you may attach that value to your time. So the value that you offer to the client, it depends on how you package your value proposition. You could be selling back their time to them, or you could be selling the avoid COVID safety aspect of it, or you could package all of it in one. So in understanding the value you bring to the table, that's where you can actually get traction and customer benefit. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And in fact, it's a good point to close on, because in fact many of the people involved here are exactly at that point on value proposition and being able to identify how to place what their innovation is actually contributing. So I think that's a very good. It's very good you've unpacked that.
Excellent.
So, if any closing remarks you'd like to make, AK?
Yes, I'd like to thank all of you for your time. I know that at this point in your journey, your time is very, very valuable, and I appreciate the opportunity to address you. And I'd also, like to wish you all the best in what you do. I think it's the unreasonable people that really bring value to society. And, there are going to be times where you're going to question your sanity in doing what you do. And your mom will tell you, just get a job and just earn a living, and be like other people. You can make a comfortable living on a salary, but that's not what life is about. At the end of the day, you want to look back and you want to say it's a life well lived. And that's what I think really, that's what we're here for. Life isn't about happiness, really. I don't believe. I think life is about meaning, and you need to take the decisions and drive those decisions that bring meaning to your life and to society. So I think you're this unique place, and I'd love to be able to at some point meet one of you, or two of you, or all of you actually, and hear your success stories, and look back on your journey 5 years from now or 10 years from now. Thank you so much, and thanks, Prof, for putting this together. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, AK, for making the time for us and generously sharing the exciting work you're involved in, and especially the wisdom that you've developed over the years. So we would certainly take advantage of that of that offer of yours to connect with us again, probably a lot sooner than you've mentioned there. Thanks very much, and we really appreciate it. You've left us with a lot to think about. The reactions don't do justice, so I'd like to just give the applause there. So thank you very much. Thanks, AK.
Thank you. Really appreciate it. Take care.